long ago. Because the earthly tabernacle is a parallel of the heavenly. And I use the expression, the heaven-earth linkage law. What happens in heaven has a parallel on earth. We're linked together. And even though the sanctuary doesn't exist today and God had it destroyed, the record of it and its services are fully preserved in Scripture so that we can understand the ways of God.
Yes. The lessons learned and the lessons that God wanted for us to be part of our journey with Him are all wrapped up in the sanctuary.
That's right. That's right. Now, let's talk for a moment. Let's go to the whiteboard. And I'm going to draw a picture of me. This is, yes, that's me. And we're going to say that God has law. These are the two tablets, the 10 Commandments. Okay? And when I violate the law, what do I become? A sinner.
Yes.
Is that right?
That is right.
And what are the wages, and what does the law say the wages of sin must be?
Death by execution.
Death by execution. All right. Death, and we're not talking here about the first death.
No.
The wages of sin is not death by laryngitis.
Right, second death.
Or cancer. That's the consequence of sin. We're talking here about the penalty for sin.
Yes.
If the IRS sends you a notice that you owe back taxes, the consequences of you owing back taxes are one thing. The penalty for owing back taxes is another.
Yes.
And when you add it all together, it's always more money than you have. So God has a law. I'll put law over here. And because I've all sinned, the Apostle Paul in Romans says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of honoring God. So God set up a really neat system. When He set up the sanctuary service, He had an altar built out in the courtyard, and sinners could bring their lamb, their atonement, and put their lamb on the altar. Now I realize my drawing is pretty bad, but you get the point. And then the sinner would come over here, and he would put his hands upon the head of the lamb, and he would confess, state what his sins were. Now, this wasn't just the kind of prayer we so often hear today, Lord, forgive me my sins. No, this was an itemized list.
Wow.
This is an itemized statement because He wants to come and He's bringing a sacrifice that costs a lot of money. That's very important. And He's bringing a sacrifice to get forgiveness and to have atonement and be right with God. So He comes in order to be right, God required the sinners to put their hands on the head of the lamb and confess their sins. After He had done that, the priest who is standing over here, the priest hands the sinner a knife, and the sinner cuts the jugular vein of the lamb or the animal, whatever it may be, and the lamb dies. And then the priest takes a little branch of hyssop, a little like at the end of a bush, sticks it into a cup where he has caught some of the blood coming out of the lamb, and the priest puts the blood on the horns of this altar, and the sin of the sinner is transferred. The guilt is transferred by the blood to the altar, and the death that the lamb experienced is the death which the sinner should have experienced.
Yes.
So the guilt of sin is transferred to the altar through blood. The only way to escape the death that the sinner is due is to bring a lamb, and the lamb dies in his place.
So you're saying that we have to make things right with God.
We not only have to make things right with God, we have to make things right with each other. Jesus said when He was on earth, don't even think about making things right with God until you have first made things right with your brother. Leave your altar. Even if you're at the altar, Jesus said, leave the altar and leave your gift there, your sacrifice, and go and make things right with your brother, and then come back and make things right with God.
So harmony is very important to God. Everything being right amongst brothers.
God says, I will not accept your offering until you have made and provided restitution.
Yes.
That's a crucial point that comes from the sanctuary.
Yes.
And it's a crucial point that is overlooked today by most Christian religions.
Yes. Well,
They
Larry,
don't teach restitution, the importance and the necessity of it.
Yes. Well, Larry, making things right with God, He's bigger than we are, but making things right with our brothers takes the swallowing of pride, and that's what makes it so difficult.
But you know, it's the swallowing of pride that makes for a happy family.
Yes, you're right.
It's when there is humility and love, not arrogance and pride, but humility and love, that happiness and joy truly come.
Yes, and that's truly.
And so when Zacchaeus became a born-again Christian, he gave half of what he had to the poor, and he restored by 400% all that he had stolen.
Yeah, wow.
The gift that Zacchaeus made needs to be talked about a lot more these days.
Yes.
But the point here, in the sanctuary service, we see a profound truth. Sin itself is never forgiven. Where does it go? Well, it goes one of two places. Letty, since I brought my lamb, my sin is transferred away from me to the altar.
Relief.
And I walk away, yes, a sinner, but not under the condemnation of death.
Right.
The lamb took my place.
Yes.